Big Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Big Apple Blitz. What's going on? Matt O'Leary alongside Anthony Rivardo. Anthony, will anything good ever happen to me again? I am at a loss. 5 straight losses for these New York Jets. I don't even have words anymore. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I think we're reaching that really depressing part of the NFL season where there's just nothing left to explain. It's like, where do we go from here for both the Jets and the Giants? Now, obviously, the Giants haven't played their Week 8 matchup yet. They'll be doing that tonight, but, they're playing the Steelers, a really good defense, and we have maybe the league's worst offense, so the expectations aren't too high there. But expectations, that's the word to really focus in on in today's episode when talking about the Jets, because we had really high expectations for this team entering the season. We thought this could be the year that the Jets finally return to some semblance of glory. And man, it's been nothing but disappointment through the first 2 months of the season. It's just truly painful to watch as an onlooker, here, Giants fan, interacting with you as a Jets fan and other Jets fans in this chat on a week-to-week basis. The devolution of where we were at the start of the year till now is just really painful and sad to watch.
Plumber Mo, he always hangs out with us. Giants fan, but always keeps it real. Says, Matt, sorry for that loss, but according to my Jets fan brother, it's the norm, and I've been getting too familiar with that bad taste. I don't even think this is normal. This is something. Now, I've seen a lot of Jets losing and a lot of disappointment and a lot of Jets heartbreak over the years, but from what preseason expectation, hope, whatever word or adjective you want to use to describe how we were feeling about this team in the preseason and off-season leading up to the start of the year and where they are now at 2-6, I don't even think the most pessimistic of Jets fans or Jets haters out there envisioned 2-6 through their first 8 games. Maybe they'll struggle and hang around 500. They'll be like 4-4 through their first 8 games. I saw people say, maybe at worst they'll be 9-8 and miss the playoffs. But 2-6 and on a fast track to having a top 10 pick, I don't think was on anyone's radar for this team.
Certainly not mine. I mean, man, I feel like a fool. I really bought into the hype during the offseason when the schedule was released. I was like, man, the second half of the schedule is really favorable for the Jets. I think they have one of the best rosters in the NFL. Man, I was predicting an easy route to the postseason for this team. I thought that they could go up to 10, 11, maybe even 12 wins. And now if they do squeeze out 9, it would be a miracle. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know how we got here. I don't know how it just collapsed like this. Again, I think there's so much talent on this roster. I had all my question marks about the coaching staff going into the season. I made those questions abundantly clear, but I never thought that it would get this bad.
No, certainly not. And when looking at this stat that Dan Orlovsky tweeted out, it kind of goes into I have no idea how we got here or how does this continue to happen. So if you give me a second to pull it up, scored 20 plus points, didn't turn it over, and allowed fewer than 250 yards. In NFL history, teams are 750-1, including the playoffs, when generating that box score. The only loss is the Jets yesterday. 750-1.
Wow.
I don't. What is there to possibly to say on that?
I don't know. That puts me at a loss for words. Like, what went wrong? If all of that went right and you still got the loss, like, what is going wrong with this team? That's truly, I've never seen anything. Nobody's ever seen anything like that, according to that stat. That's truly an anomaly.
Something that, if we can get into this game a little bit, even if the Jets won this game, I would not have felt great because they looked awful throughout the entirety of the game. Now, there were points where they were moving the ball, and there were some positives to take out of the game. I would say more so on the offensive side than defensively. The tackling effort's been a little bit frustrating to me for some of these guys, especially like a big name like, Sauce Gardner. I think the effort level hasn't been there, which frustrates me. But two key things to note. I want to start here though. The Jets have a quarterback that's going to be going to the Hall of Fame one day. And for whatever reason, they can't get a playoff. They wasted 3 timeouts in the first quarter to avoid delay of game penalties. They actually took a delay of game penalty on a 2-point conversion that they absolutely needed to have. And spoiler, they didn't convert from the 7-yard line. Maybe would have had a better chance at the 2, but we'll never know because they took the delay of game penalty. How is it that they can't get up to the line of scrimmage, get a play in, and operate a normal NFL offense?
I mean, that's the level of unpreparedness that gets coaches fired, but this team already fired its coach. So if it's just not getting corrected now, I don't know when or how it does. And you're right to point out Aaron Rodgers is a future Hall of Fame quarterback. He's meant to be the leader and he's meant to be a genius at the line of scrimmage. It's inexcusable that this is happening on the offensive side of the ball. And who else can you point to at this point? Like, you can't just point to Hackett or Todd Downing and just say that it's all the coaching staff. The quarterback has a lot of autonomy now with, Hackett being removed as the play caller. That was at least the assumption. And I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers. He can do what he wants. Like, let's face it. Let's be real about it. When he's in the huddle, it's up to him to get everybody set at the line of scrimmage and to get them ready to go. And that's not happening. So I don't know who else you point to except for the quarterback.
No, you have to point to the quarterback on that one. And like box score numbers, Rodgers wasn't horrible in this game. He threw for a couple touchdowns, went over 200 yards. Yards per attempt was up there, but he's still very apprehensive to take shots down the field. And forgive me, I can't remember who ended up saying it on the Patriots side of things, but they were on the defensive line. They were saying he's just not moving well back there. And I think that kind of plays into this, why there's pressure, because he can't really move around well right now. He's standing in the pocket, tentative to throw over the middle of the field. And on top of that, all the other issues on the offensive side of the ball. And it kind of just, exacerbates as we go on here.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like every week something goes from bad to worse. And I mean, like you said, Aaron Rodgers with a decent box score and the stats yesterday, and that's been the case in a few of these games. But I still feel like there's something missing in his game, and there's just that added touch of Aaron Rodgers' flair that we all expected, like that little difference that he makes, whether it be at the line of scrimmage or on certain throws and accuracy. I think it's missing. I just don't think that he is the same player that, maybe he would have been a year ago had he not had that season-ending injury 5 snaps into the season. I just think that something is truly missing with Rodgers, and he's not living to the hype. And unfortunately, the whole rest of the team isn't either on both sides of the ball. So it's just really disappointing to see. And again, somebody who was rooting for the Aaron Rodgers comeback story, I thought that, if anybody was in prime position to be comeback player of the year, it could have and should have been him. But so far through 8 weeks, it's been a total collapse, and he hasn't really done enough to give you confidence that going into 2025, he'll remain as the QB, or throughout the rest of the season that he can actually lead this team to convincing victories, because nothing's been convincing about this team's performance at all in the first 8 weeks.
So I wanted to go to a couple comments here because I already said my piece on this, but I want to hear from your perspective and an outsider perspective. First State Jets is saying it's not ownership, it isn't the GM, and it isn't coaching. Players got to perform better, and then followed it up with it's revisionist history to say that Seibert was better than Greg Zuerlein. That's ridiculous. So any thoughts on either of those two?
I have thoughts on, the first comment about it not being ownership or the GM coaching. Players got to perform better. The players do need to perform better. You have players underperforming across the board. I think that's like objectively true. Sauce Gardner being a standout, Aaron Rodgers being another standout. These guys are not reaching the expectations of their profile. But at the same time, going into the season, We pointed out how talented the roster was. I don't think it's the GM. I don't think that Joe Douglas has been perfect. I don't think he's perfectly constructed this roster by any means, and he definitely made some mistakes along the way. But at the end of the day, this roster does have a lot of top-end talent, and it's not reaching expectations. So the performance does need to be better. I don't disagree with that, but I do think that coaching plays a huge part in this. I mean, you could probably pinpoint way more of minor coaching decisions than I can. Matt, you could probably find several different instances, but I mean, like, even the fact that they're stacking talent at wide receiver, but Malachi Corley could absolutely provide a spark in a quick passing game. He doesn't even play, and there's other players across this team that I just don't think being utilized properly. So I think coaching still plays a massive role in it. Even with the firing of Saleh, coaching's still a problem, and then ownership is the biggest problem in my opinion. So to say that ownership isn't to blame, I think is unequivocally false. I think Woody Johnson and the way that he meddles and the way that, he's gotten in the way of certain things and forced certain players and coaches into certain boxes. I think that ownership might be the biggest problem that this Jets team faces right now. And, until Woody Johnson gets a grip and stops meddling so much, I think you're going to have a lot of tough sledding. And I think that's really what's holding this team back.
Yeah, my take on it originally was that it's all of the things. It's not just the players, it's not just the coach, it's not just the GM, it's not just the owners. I think it's from the word I used was from top to bottom, the top being all the way up to Woody Johnson and the bottom being the players. Yes, guys have to play better. A good example of that, I brought up a second ago was Sauce Gardner. I don't think he's put much of an effort into his tackling this year, and I think that's really cost them. And he hasn't covered as well in comparison to years gone by. Tyron Smith is going to be a Hall of Famer one day. He has to play better. Rodgers has to play better. Brees and Garrett earlier in the year needed to play better. I think both those guys have looked much better the last few weeks. But when something is this wrong, I don't feel like you could just pin it on one group and be like, oh, well, it's just the players have to play better. And you can't give any blame to the guy who put all these pieces together in Joe Douglas. And I get it. He had a really good 2022 draft class. There are some other decisions that he's made that I've liked, but at the end of the day, he's going to be the general manager for over 100 games, and they're going to have no playoff appearances in 6 years. Like, I don't know how he doesn't also get some of the burden here.
No, he does. He absolutely does. And whether you want to, I mean, the perfect opportunity to point out blame to hand to Joe Douglas is the 2023-24 season. I think that when Rodgers went down, the whole season collapsed because who stepped right back in was Zach Wilson, and that should have never happened. So it's almost like this team. I said top heavy talent earlier, and I think that's kind of the kryptonite of this team, that all of the talent is top heavy. So when you have guys leave with injuries, or you have guys who are underperforming, who's stepping in to replace them? Not a lot of talent behind those guys. It's a roster that has immediate starting talent, but when you get behind that, it's shaky ground. And I think that's been a problem that I've seen with the Giants for many years. And, they've often had too much money tied up to certain positions, and it makes it impossible to add necessary depth to injury-prone positions. I think the Jets are similar in that way, where the depth isn't necessarily the best, and that's something that you can point to for Joe Douglas. And also the fact that a lot of these splash moves have been for players who are clearly aging their way out of the NFL. They're not in their prime. We're bringing in guys who are former All-Pros and former Pro Bowlers, but the key word there being former. We've got former MVP Aaron Rodgers, former first-team All-Pro Davante Adams. A lot of these moves that are being made are not for players in their prime, growing and ascending. Even I'll point to the Giants. I think a really clever decision that they made was to trade for and sign Brian Burns, a player who was only 25 and still ascending. Yes, former Pro Bowler, but still has another 5 years in his prime. A lot of those big offseason acquisitions that the Jets made, these guys are past their prime. Even Hassan Reddick, I know he had a great statistical season last year, but still past his prime. Davante Adams past his prime. Allen Lazard and Aaron Rodgers. So I think that, Joe Douglas is probably at the bottom out of all of those different factors. I would give him the least blame, but the blame has to be spread all over the place. Everybody is at fault for the way that this team has spiraled out of control through the first 8 weeks of the season.
Now, something that really is not the only reason why, I don't want to make this seem like this is the only reason why the Jets lost yesterday or have lost, at least 3 of these games, but the general manager is still trotting Greg Zerloin out there, who has now played a very key role in 3, if not 4 losses. I would say 4, including this past game against the Patriots, against the Bills. He had an extra point blocked that was bailed out for on a penalty, and then missed a field goal in Pittsburgh. The Denver game, they never brought in anyone in season, and it's not necessarily going back to, picking Austin Seibert, who's now kicking for the Commanders, keeping him on the roster over Greg Zerline. That's not what anyone is necessarily saying here. You have this repeat problem in season, and we see the Packers make a change at the kicking position in season just 2 weeks ago, and the guy's drilling kicks all over the field. And special teams matters, and they've lost now a handful of games because of poor special teams units.
Yeah, and that again kind of I feel like reinforces the point that I was just making about players past their prime. Like Greg the Leg used to be something years ago, and it's almost like he's still starting and still kicking for this team based on his previous resume. But what are you doing right now? Are you living up to your expectations right now? Are you successfully fulfilling your job in this current season? And he's not. And even still, like you said, they're continuing to roll with him. So what has he done? Is he earning this on merit, or is he earning this on a previous resume? And I think that if you're making roster decisions based on previous resume, oftentimes you're asking yourself to get burned. And again, I think that's really what's happened to this Jets team. A lot of these guys have previous resumes, but right now they are not adding anything to those resumes. They're just working based on those resumes. So I think that's also the case with Greg Zerline. And maybe you have to call out Joe Douglas and say you need to be more cutthroat and you need to make more difficult roster decisions and get rid of aging veterans who aren't living up to the hype. That's totally part of it. And I think, I think really what I'm concluding here with all that we're talking about, this is a lot of players past their prime who are playing like they're past their prime.
Yep. And Johnny Boy has one comment in here saying this is a roster, not a team. And it feels that way. Like there's a lot of names on here, familiar faces, names that we've seen, but they're not playing together as a unit, and it's on them for that. It's also on the coaches for not getting enough out of them, and it's also on the GM who put it together. And he had to go out and trade for Aaron Rodgers because the number 2 overall pick didn't work out. He had to go out and bring in Tyron Smith at 33 because the left tackle that he drafted ended up being a bust in Mekhi Becton. And they take these really big swings to try to catch lightning in a bottle, and it just completely blew up in their face. And I don't even necessarily blame them for going that route. He had a good group of young players, and it felt like with Zach Wilson, just really poor quarterback play. And you saw, the Rams have success after they trade for Stafford, and going back a little bit, but Peyton Manning in Denver, and Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, and you're trying to replicate that, and just unfortunately end up coming nowhere close. So it really stinks. It's frustrating, and honestly, I don't know where they go from here. At 2-6, I don't think Joe Douglas is coming back, but is he now going to trade off pieces going to the deadline, like a Mike Williams or a DJ Reed or someone on an expiring deal, or is he just not going to do anything because he knows he's a dead man walking? Like I don't know what the plan is the rest of the way now.
Well, I'm not really sure how many moves there are left to make for this Jets team. I think it was Matt Ryan yesterday on CBS was saying you've pretty much done everything. You've done all you can, and now you just are what you are. And I don't disagree with that assessment. I don't think that there's anything that Joe Douglas can even do. Like he's given this coaching staff a roster full of talent, whether it be talent past its prime or not, there's still talent there. I don't think that you can make many more moves. And if you do, you're going to sacrifice your future. And right now at 2-6, I don't think you can afford to do that. You have to think about the future. You have to think ahead to 2025, as difficult as it may be to do when it's not even Halloween. You hate to do that sort of thing, but I think you have to just let reality set in and realize like, all right, the rest of this year, let's see what we could salvage. Let's see who stands out. Time to give some of these young guys like Corley and others time to play, put them in the lineup and get them some experience so that in 2025, you're better positioned to build a roster with youth and with talent in its prime and move forward that way. But right now, I think that at 2-6, I mean, you can't expect the team to make a complete 180 turnaround to get ultra competitive again. So you just can't be sacrificing assets at the deadline anymore. You have to start thinking ahead to 2025.
The good news is they play again in primetime in 4 days. So we get to do this all over again on Thursday and talk about an upcoming matchup against the Houston Texans, who are awesome, and the Jets are not. So yeah, look forward to that one on Thursday. But another tough pill to swallow on this Monday for Big Apple Blitz. But one other team, the New York Giants, they play tonight on the road in Pittsburgh. We spent a lot of time previewing that game on Thursday, but can get into some more Giants storylines as well this week. Where do you want to get started on your Giants?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with the quarterback position. It's easy. It's low-hanging fruit, and we know that it's been the topic of conversation for, I mean, I want to say the whole season, but even prior to the season, we've been talking about questions at quarterback. Obviously, it's becoming more and more obvious that Daniel Jones is not the future of this team. If that wasn't obvious already to some, I think it's obvious now. He was benched in the fourth quarter last week. Drew Lock threw 8 passes, only completed 3 of them. But on all of those passes that he threw, they were anticipatory throws, which gives you some sort of excitement for when he does inevitably get into the lineup. But tonight versus Pittsburgh, I have to say, I think that this is the nail in the coffin for Daniel Jones. I think this is going to be an ugly game. It's prime time. We know how bad Daniel Jones is on prime time. I don't need to repeat all those stats because I probably said them so much that they're ingrained in everybody listening, right in their memory. Everybody knows them. Daniel Jones is terrible on prime time. I think this is going to be a bloodbath. I mean, the Steelers' defense is excellent. Their offense doesn't even need to be great. Just needs to be good enough. And Daniel Jones, man, I don't have confidence in him. And it sounds like, according to a new report from Jordan Rannon, that the locker room doesn't have a ton of confidence in him either. Now, Jordan Rannon anonymously spoke to a bunch of players on the Giants and in the locker room, and they said, yeah, Daniel Jones is the starter, and the locker room isn't pushing for a change at quarterback. They still believe in him. However, it might be different if Tyrod Taylor was in the room. You know, maybe they would want him starting. And I think to me, that really just highlights that they don't feel like Daniel Jones gives them the best chance to win. They just feel like he's the best option that they have, but they wish that they had a better option. And I think that's how we all feel as Giants fans. We know that Daniel Jones might be the best quarterback on the roster, but that's not saying a whole lot. You know, he's still not good. And when Tyrod Taylor was in the lineup last year, the guy was throwing dimes downfield. He was pushing the ball. He was aggressive. He was throwing with anticipation. All of those things true. And the locker room seemed to really rally behind that. That second half of the season, there was a lot more energy and a lot more fun in the Giants locker room. But now with Daniel Jones as the QB, it seems like the life has been sucked out of this team. And I don't feel very hopeful that he can generate a productive offense at all at any point this season.
Yeah, no, that's totally valid and totally fair. And I know that we've both been very critical of Daniel Jones this year, and I'm not convinced. And you had a great rant on Fireside Giants about not being convinced that he's the best guy to help you win games, because we saw what, Tommy DeVito did last year. And I almost wonder where I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because I think it's a good discussion point. Last year, we saw Tommy DeVito come in, he won a few games, and it dropped the Giants out of contention for a quarterback in the NFL draft. If they do that again and pivot to Tommy DeVito, and let's say, I don't know, they win 3 more games and they finish as a 5-win team, are you upset with that? Do you want them to just lose out? Like, where are you personally? And then where do you think the fan base is on this?
I know that the fan base is kind of at the point where they're like, losing is in the best interest of this team. And yeah, I get that argument. You're probably not wrong if you say that losing would help this team reboot the quarterback position. But at the end of the day, I don't think that there's any guarantee anywhere that you draft. I don't think having the number 1 overall pick guarantees that you're finding the right quarterback and revamping your roster. I don't think having the number 32 pick guarantees that, it's like the draft is always a crapshoot. And for me, I can't stomach the continuous losses from this Giants team, especially when we're talking about against division rivals. If we're talking about tanking the season, that means we have to lose again to Dallas, Philadelphia, and Washington. I can't do that shit anymore, man. I need this Giants team to win some of these games. Like, it's important for the locker room, it's important for the culture, and it's important for this fan base to feel like they have a reason to be confident in this regime. John Mara, we spoke about this in the last episode, said that these guys are safe. These these coaches and this general manager, this front office, likely to be staying with the team in 2025. Well, if that's the case, I need to see some evidence on the field that that's the right decision before that decision is made. Because even if he wants to be patient and he wants to keep this regime, a lot can change between now and the end of the season. So if they don't win another game, how can you justify keeping this regime intact? You can't. So I need to see some progress from the team, and I need to see this coach make sound decisions and wise up and take this quarterback out of the lineup to give this team the best chance to win. Because if you're going to preach every single week that you are doing what's in the best interest of winning, then you need to practice that as well. So it can't just be words. Back it up, make a change at QB, and see what you can spark. Otherwise, everybody's going to check out and everybody's going to lose faith in this regime.
Yeah, I think that's a very, valid point, and it adds a little nuance to this conversation because you have to kind of see where the rest of your team is going forward. And if you really do want the guys in Joe Shane and Brian Daboll running the show, and it sounds like, and again, things could change, but based on what we were talking about last week, it sounds like the Giants ownership is a believer in the coach and the general manager. So I guess you'd want to see growth. It's a double-edged sword because you want to see the growth and you want to see them continue to show signs of getting better and improving. But if you win and take yourself out of the quarterback running, that makes things a little bit more complicated. I don't know. It's not a perfect science. We've seen quarterbacks in the top 3 miss and not be hits. There's no perfect way to finding your guy. It's just about doing it. So if they did go to Tommy DeVito or if they did make any sort of change and they win a couple extra games, I don't know how mad we could be at this team.
Yeah, I think that this is a team that I mean, in an ideal world, obviously we find our next, 20 years of great quarterback play. You get your superstar legend in the first round. Yeah, that's ideal. But I think this is a team that's path to winning football games again is finding a solid veteran who steps in and just immediately gives you winning football. Similar, like as you just mentioned with the Rams and when they found Matt Stafford on the trade block, plugged him in and won a Super Bowl. I'm not saying that this is a Super Bowl roster for the Giants, but I think that they are a solid veteran winning quarterback away from making the playoffs and being competitive. And so looking ahead to this 2025 offseason, it's obviously really far ahead, and I don't want to look too far into it, but quarterback class is a little bit hit or miss right now is what it seems. There's definitely controversy surrounding each one of those potential first-round picks. So maybe this is just one of those years where the Giants try and build some moral victories throughout the rest of the season, be competitive against good teams, and plug in one of those veterans that brings you to the playoffs year in and year out in the offseason. That might be the way that it goes. And if that's not the way that it goes, then who knows? Because it's just football is random, right? And now looking ahead to this week 8 matchup, which is going to be played tonight, I think we're going to get a lot of answers to some of our questions about this Giants team. Is this defense truly legit? If this turns out to be a defensive grudge match where it's like a 13-10 win for the Steelers, I think we know, okay, the defense is legit, but the offense is still absolutely terrible. We're right about both of those things. But the thing is with Daniel Jones, you really don't know what you're getting every single week. So are we going to be right when we say this is probably his last game as a starter, considering he got benched last week? Or is he randomly going to throw for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and squeak out a win against the Steelers, and now he's bought himself another 5 weeks as a starter? I don't really know, but I do know we will get answers to questions in this game. Big questions will be answered in tonight's matchup with the Steelers.
Yeah, I would really anticipate the Giants defense having a strong day just because, one, as we pointed out, Steelers offense isn't really a juggernaut by any stretch of the imagination. And I think for the most part this year, the Giants defense has been a really good story. They've played well. The defensive line has been working. And there's some signs of progress on that side of the ball. Really the only issue, not the only issue, but the main issue I see for the Giants in this game is how are they going to move the ball? I think they're going to struggle in pass protection with, a beat up offensive line right now. And TJ Watt, we know can wreak havoc in any game. He's done it many, many times before, but you also are starting a quarterback who tends to create own pressure on himself. So it's the worst case scenario, unfortunately, of a banged up offensive line and a quarterback who has the tendency to run himself into more pressure. And I just don't know how you're going to be able to score more than 13, 14 points in this game.
I mean, considering we haven't scored 13, 14 points in the last 2 games combined, I don't feel confident that we will. I think that this is one of those games against this defense where maybe the Giants get shut out. Maybe they only score 3, maybe they only score 10. I don't know. This is going to be low scoring day for the Giants most likely. But again, Daniel Jones is just random as fuck. I never know what I'm getting with him. Sometimes he goes out there and throws 3 touchdowns, 300 yards, and the Giants offense explodes, and then the next week it crashes back down to earth. So I truly can't make any definitive predictions with this team. I'm really so confused about what this team is, because some days Brian Dable looks like a top 5 play caller in the NFL. Other days he looks like he shouldn't be calling plays in the NFL. So I don't know what we're going to get, but if I had to make an educated guess, defensive grudge match. You said it. The Giants defense has been a great story. It's been impressive. It's such a great story because a lot of these players who are standing out on this Giants defense are young. That's what you love to see. Like Tyler Nubin, rookie safety, phenomenal. Rookie cornerback Drew Phillips, excellent. Those guys have been great for this team, and that's made this defense really exciting to watch. But on the offensive side of the ball, you've got a youngster, Malik Neighbors, who is just phenomenal. However, is he getting the ball enough since coming back from the concussion? I'm not sure. And do we feel confident that he can hit some of those explosive plays Daniel Jones can to Neighbors downfield? No, because he hasn't hit any of those deep throws at any point this season. And then you have another solid youngster in Tyrone Tracy. But for some reason, he wasn't even part of the game plan last week. So again, that ties into Brian Dable being just as inconsistent and confusing as Daniel Jones is. So this is just a team with question marks everywhere. Confusion is really the word that I can use to describe my experience as a Giants fan this season. But going into this primetime matchup with the Steelers, you've said it. This defense is going to be really tough to move the ball against. And I just can't envision this team putting up enough points to beat the Steelers on the road.
Yeah, I mean, just pulling up what they've allowed on defense: 10, 6, 10, 27, 20, 13, 15. So 20 points or less in 6 of their 7 games so far. That's a really, really strong unit. The one game they didn't was a loss to the Colts 27-24. Although, we've pointed fun at the offense of the Steelers, which isn't great, but they've scored over 30 points the last 2 weeks. So one of those times against the Jets. Are you looking at this as a possible change for the Steelers, and maybe that their offense is finding its groove, or more so just kind of beating up on a defeated Raiders and Jets team?
I think this Steelers offense is finding its groove. I think that there were crucial differences at the line of scrimmage for the Steelers last week, between Justin Fields' ability to manage a game and his ability to change plays. And there was just a different level of command at the line of scrimmage from Russell Wilson, which is what you expect. I mean, Russell Wilson, he's a future Hall of Famer himself. He's a player who, yes, past his prime, but still has innate skills and abilities that younger quarterbacks do not have based on experience and experience playing in big games as well. So Justin Fields, while he wasn't playing bad football by any means, he was playing good and winning football. I think this offense is turning a corner just because of the difference in line of scrimmage control that Russell Wilson has. And so looking at this Giants team, they've been great against veteran quarterbacks, young quarterbacks. They've just been great this season, but Russell Wilson is going to find ways to manage the game. And because of his ability to manage the game and the Giants' lack of ability to control their possession and manage the game themselves, it's going to be, another performance where the Steelers offense can look like it's building solid performances together. They're going up against a good Giants defense, but I don't know if this Giants defense is going to be able to stop them once we get to the third or fourth quarter, because like the Eagles, bad offense there for the last few weeks faces the Giants. Second half of the game, they pop off. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Giants offense can't stay on the field, gets the ball, immediately hands it right back to the other team. And the defense is just spending all night long running around, losing energy, and ultimately crumbling in the third or fourth quarter. And I think that the Steelers are one of those teams with a strong rushing attack that is perfectly matched up against this Giants defense to control the clock, control the game, wear them out, and end up exploding in the second half.
Yeah, I was going to say, this kind of feels like a game that the Giants keep close in the first half, but then kind of get worn down in the second half. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers end up winning by like a touchdown or maybe even double digits, just because it takes a lot on this, on any defense. I'm going to say on this defense, but on any defense, to just really have a no-show performance from your offense week over week. 7 against Cincinnati, 3 against the Eagles. 3 times this year in their 7 games, they've scored 10 points or less. I think there's a chance it happens again for a third straight week, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you just described it. That's kind of what the name of the Giants game has been the last few weeks. You'll keep it close for a little while, but eventually you just get worn down because of an inability to control the clock and control possession on the offensive side of the ball. And really looking back to a couple seasons ago when the Giants had that surprising playoff run in 2022, the name of their game then was controlling the clock and controlling the ball. They didn't turn the ball over much. They were great inside of the red zone, which made all the difference in the world, and they played clean football and they controlled the game. Now they don't have any control over the game. And a lot of that has to do with their inability to score touchdowns in the red zone and their inability to score big plays because, sometimes just getting out there and scoring in 3 plays, I mean, that does a lot to energize your team and keep your offense fresh. But by the end of the game, when you have Malik Neighbors jogging routes because he's so gassed, or you have him giving up on plays because he knows that he's not going to get the ball, I mean, what can you really expect from this team? At the end of the day, though, I'm praying to God that Malik Neighbors goes out there and has a big time performance because my fantasy team desperately needs him to.
Yes. I need Malik Neighbors to have a good performance tonight. I am down in I know, not that anyone cares about my fantasy team, but Anthony brings up his team every week, so I want to bring up where I'm at. Okay. Actually, I'm up by 3 points before Neighbors even takes a snap. So I should be good unless he gets me -3 points, which I don't think he will.
I'm actually in a very similar spot, up by a few points, Neighbors, and then my opponent has somebody else. We'll see how it goes. But no, I think Malik will get his targets. You got to keep in mind, even against good defenses in the first few weeks of the season, he was averaging 10 or more targets per game. So against this good Steelers defense, you still expect him to get the ball. But one thing that confused me last week versus Philadelphia is that a lot of his targets were plays where he needed to win reps, right? Like it was one-on-one against a cornerback where you have to run a complicated route and do it on your own. And I thought that was a weird change from 3 weeks prior when they were playing, say, Cleveland or Washington 4 weeks prior, where a lot of his targets were manufactured. It was like he's running a drag and somebody's running a deep dig behind him. So it's creating a 5-yard cushion between him and anybody else. So boom, he catches it, turns upfield, makes a guy miss, and creates yards after the catch. Last week, there were 0 yak opportunities for Malik Neighbors. And I thought that was just weird. Like, why change the game plan if it was working a few weeks ago? Why is that not the well that we're going back to? So hopefully they get back to that tonight, especially again against a good defense and against a good pass rush. I need Daniel Jones to get the ball out of his hands ASAP. Get the ball out to Malik Neighbors quickly and just let Neighbors pick up the yards after the catch. Don't ask him to create all this yardage off the ball. Create it on the ball. That's going to be your key to moving the football as a Giants offense and your key to hopefully sneaking out an upset win. But again, it just feels unlikely going up against a pass rush like this and having a quarterback who holds on to the ball too long and takes a lot of sacks. I mean, you definitely can envision some opportunities here for TJ Watt and these other guys to force turnovers, especially considering this Giants offensive line is banged up. Obviously, no Andrew Thomas, so Josh Azidu in at left tackle, and Jermaine Illuminor is playing tonight. However, he is playing injured, and he's lining up against TJ Watt. So there's definitely cause for concern with this offensive line. And again, with a quarterback who just plays poorly under pressure, you could see this becoming an absolute disaster very early on.
Johnny Boy wants to know, and this might be a good discussion to wrap up the show before we make our final predictions for Giants Steelers. Who currently has the worst post-game press conferences, the Giants or the Jets? I think you can make a strong case for either side here, Anthony, because nobody likes to make things more challenging than they have to be for themselves for both these two franchises.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest, I don't necessarily watch a lot of Jets post-game press conferences, but I'm sure we've all heard me rant about Giants post-game press conferences and how I feel about them. So it's just a sad state of affairs for Giants and Jets post-game press conferences. I just wish, man, that this Giants team would at least give a window of insight into the organization, not because I get it. You don't want to give away like trade secrets, so to speak. You don't want the other teams to know what you're doing. To be honest, I don't think that other teams listen too carefully to what the Giants say in the media anyway, nor do they give a shit. But the Giants fans absolutely do. And we need to know that something is being done to try to correct this horrible season. So far, they don't give any indication that that's the case. And that's endlessly frustrating as a Giants fan.
Yeah, for the Jets side of things, you had yesterday Jeff Ulbrich refer to this stretch as a moment of darkness, and then Aaron Rodgers followed it up with, hang on, I've been in the darkness. You've got to go in there and make peace with it.
Wow.
So there we go.
Very poetic.
It's just Come on. You can't make this shit up. You really can't. All right. Let's get to our prediction time on this show. I don't remember if we did score predictions on Monday or no, Thursday. Sorry. But we'll do them again if not. What are we thinking for this one?
I think we did do score predictions, but honestly, can't remember what it was. But I'm just going to go with 20-10. I think the Giants offense gets in the end zone once. I think it's Neighbors. I think they get a field goal. And ultimately, I think they end up losing because the Steelers defense is too good. So 20-10 Pittsburgh.
I'm going to go 17-6 Pittsburgh. Low scoring, ugly.
No touchdowns for the Giants then, huh?
No, 2 field goals. I'm sorry. I don't want to do that to you, but I just don't have much faith in this team.
Well, I mean, listen, if that's the case, though, I don't see how you go another touchdownless game without making a quarterback change. Like, if that happens, Matt, and then we get on the show on Thursday and the Giants have announced that Daniel Jones is starting in week 9, I'll probably have an aneurysm. I'm going to scream my head off. I just can't take it anymore. So
for the content, this might actually be good for Thursday. I hope it doesn't come to that, but it very well could.
It might not be good for my mental health, though.
No, neither of these teams are good for that. Jets lose in disgusting fashion up in New England. Giants play tonight. We'll have you covered on Thursday with a preview of, well, the Jets will play on Thursday, so we'll get into Jets Texans, and we will give our thoughts on the Giants, Steelers game, and preview. Who do they have next week?
Washington, I believe.
Washington. Okay. Well, Washington's on fire right now, so we'll have that one previewed for you as well. That'll do it. I'm Matt. He's Anthony. We'll catch you next time.